of you have had some of you have had a chance to go out and meet with Scott. I did have a chance with Abe as well, and we I did have a call with Abe and the mayor as well with the governor's office after our meeting with Scott, and it's all hands on deck, and we'll just turn it over to Scott to lead the way, and anyone else who's with him today to guide us through where we're at. I know we're going to be a little leveraged on a timeline, but we'll have an opportunity to talk about that as well.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. It was great getting to chat with each of you. I knew some of you. I knew all of you a little bit, but it was great to get to know each of you better. So communication is a great thing, and this is a tough hurdle to jump over, but it's also an opportunity to talk with and work with more people. So thank you. I mentioned to most of you when we met how important the June 12th event was, when we had over 8,000 people here and we were third highest attendance in the entire country, behind only Nashville and Las Vegas. And we're still continuing to try to come out of this pandemic. Tonight we have Lenny Moore here, as I mentioned, Reading High grad, NFL top 100 players. And we're working to come through this period of time, but it was a difficult time for us before this stadium requirement was sort of thrust upon us. The RFILs in this stadium, as you all know, impacts the city and the region economically and on a quality of life level. And this stadium improvement topic, as I explained to each of you, Major League Baseball has requirements, larger locker rooms, things of that nature. This is not the first time that we have had to face this. Craig Stein's owned the team since 1986, has worked with the city and the state to improve the stadium at various points along the line. This is just the next sort of check mark, I guess you would say, in that process of renovating the stadium. And those renovations, some of them for fan amenities, many of them for player amenities, have really made this ballpark America's classic ballpark, widely regarded as the #1 historic minor league baseball stadium in the country. So we appreciate all that the city has done to work with Craig over the years. You know most of this, so I won't go into any more detail than you need, but there used to be 160 affiliated teams in 2019. Now there are only 120. So we made it through that. We are the longest affiliation of anyone in the country with the Philadelphia Phillies since 1967. We have been offered and accepted a license agreement as one of the 120. And now we have to meet these new facility requirements to remain one of the 120. We have submitted for RAC-P funding. The urgency of the conversations that I had with each of you is to, quite frankly, try to get our local funding completely figured out as quickly as we can to deliver that information to the state and to the RAC-P analysis team. We have pledged to put in $3 million. We would hope that the city would put in $3 million and the county would put in $3 million. And the three of us would stand shoulder to shoulder with those $3 million commitments, and that we would relay that information as quickly as possible to the state. I've been told as recently as today that they are going to be making the RAC-P decisions in the next week to 2 weeks, which is quicker than I told some of you when we met. I did hear that it could be as soon as this week or next. So if we can show the state that we have $3 million from the RFILs, $3 million from the city, and $3 million from the county, if we can deliver that information to the state, our hope is that the state would match those funds in the neighborhood of, say, $7 million so that we could complete this project, bring the stadium up to the requirements, and continue to work forward to really have this be a showpiece franchise, to have Reading be a showpiece city, and continue to work on partnerships to fill the ballpark even more often in the off season, develop tentacles to even more of the stadium district and this part of the city and all of those things and just sort of continue along. So I would be happy to answer any questions that any of you have on any of that.
Okay, Scott, thank you for the overview. And again, many of you have had a chance to speak with Scott directly. If you have not, part of his ask is going to be that we consider a resolution next Monday night, just agreeing that we would commit the $3 million. The where and the how is yet to be defined, but that's the number isn't an issue. The question is just making sure we get the full support behind it. So I want to open it up for any questions or comments at this time that anybody has. Who has any comments or questions at this point? Wow, it's a quiet group. Go ahead, Donna.
Jeff,
Strat, and then Donna.
Jeff,
Yep, go ahead, Strat. Strat, go ahead, sir. Did you have a question, Strat? Donna, go
okay,
ahead.
I think we ought to be proud that we have someone like, we should be proud here in the city of Reading that we have someone like Scott involved in this. I've been around longer than I think anybody out at the stadium.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Strat. I think we all agree with that. Donna, you had a comment?
Yes, just a couple things here. And
I'm going back to the 50s when I played there. I umpired there.
Strat, are you done? Okay, Strat, are you done with your comments? All right, we're gonna
No,
go.
I'm having a problem here, Jeff. I'm sorry. But thank you, Scotty.
All right, thank you, Strat. Go ahead, Donna.
yes, a few things here. First of all, thank you. I was glad I had the opportunity to go out there and meet with Scott and have that long conversation. It clarified a lot of things and it put a lot of things in perspective. I understand both sides of this. I understand citizens' concerns, but I also feel strongly that the stadium and the presence of the Fightins is critical to the county, to the city, and certainly to that particular area. One thing that I see from our standpoint as public officials is the funding itself. If we're able to do this, find an appropriate stream of funding, is that this particular enterprise does afford very affordable family entertainment. And that's few and far between. When you look at the cost of amusement parks, when you look at the cost of other things, even movies these days, the fact that a good part of the year there is affordable family sports and entertainment available, I think cannot be underemphasized. I also believe that that the historic and the sentimental portion of this is really critical to the area. We as a city have lost so much in the last 20 years, from the outlets to the presence and the dominance of media. We've had a lot of losses. This is something I don't think we should be losing, and I certainly advocate for us to keep this in every possible way. And finally, Scott referred to the stadium district. That's sort of unofficial. It's never really been categorized as such. But when you look at the proximity of George Field and the great vast wasteland that used to be Glidden, that's now empty, and hopefully if we can keep the affiliation with the Reading, with the Philadelphia Phillies, and keep this minor league team here, and work strongly towards the establishment of the stadium district, that would include the development maybe of a water sports park or something at the Glidden site that would then link the George Field and link the stadium and the small ancillary businesses, some of which have thrived for nearly 70 plus years. I think of Mike's Sandwich Shop, Mike's Tavern, and some of the small businesses out there, Partech, Fortune 500 company on the border of the stadium. There's so much possibility. the proximity to Route 61 and the major highways, and even within District 5, the River Road extension. That will also bring traffic down will bring traffic down Front Street and connecting to the bypass Route 61. So it's at a critical juncture, both literally and figuratively. So I hope we can see our way clear to support this resolution, and I really urge the county commissioners to do the same, and our state legislative delegation to be able to produce this along with the governor's office. This is just a win-win for everyone. So I can't say enough how much I support this. Thank you.
All right, Marcia.
Okay. And first of all, I want to be able to thank Scott and the time that we were able to spend yesterday with both myself, Councilwoman Cepeda Freitas, and our city auditor, Maria Rodriguez, because we all looked at it from different perspectives. I think it's important to start out with the fact that there is a legacy and a history to the stadium. And if you look at economic development, you need to start at some place, and you don't discard the things that have been productive for a city to be able to look at the investment of dollars. So I look at this as an investment in the future. I did have a couple questions and Scott answered them, but I think it would be good to have it shared with the public regarding, and I was very, very clear. I feel like the Fighting Phils have done the utmost to be able to maintain a high standard of a ballpark, of a club, of everything we need. My issue is more with Major League Baseball, okay? And the fact that it's a big business that I don't know that I can completely trust just because of some of the practices. But that is my point of view, but I still think there's an opportunity for partnerships. I just want to get that out there on the record. But one of my questions to Scott was in terms of the contract, because I didn't want to see all this investment occur and then not have, for Major League Baseball, the continuing investment. So Scott, could we talk about that a little, what that looks like?
Sure. The license that we were offered is a 10-year window. So we are currently in our first 10-year term of this new license agreement. Within that 10 years, you still have to meet certain requirements. As I explained to you guys, we have to get from whatever penalty points we're at now down to 30 points by 2023, 20 points by 2024, 10 points by 2025. And there are other such requirements in our license agreement as well. It's a 10-year window. The term evergreen has been used, as long as you stay current with Major League Baseball on all the requirements and do the right things, you would theoretically then renew that 10-year window. And that's a conversation, honestly, that we could have as we get closer to the finish line on this project. But as I expressed to some of you, we were the first stadium that they measured. They came here on Tuesday, and they sent their top guy from New York City to come do the actual point score. And the reason they did that is because we are a baseball town, and we have built two $1 million facilities, one for inner city kids and one for physically and developmentally challenged kids. And they gave us the #1 community service award, Major League Baseball and minor league baseball. So I don't know that this answers your question and to the point that we would all sleep 100% easily. But I think that Major League Baseball and minor league baseball look at Reading as a legacy franchise, a place that they're most proud of. That's why I think they came here and measured us first. So I think once we bring the stadium up to specifications and we meet all those criteria, they will continue to show us as an example to other people. And some of you were very forward thinking and actually brought to me and said, how can we maximize that even more? And how can we become more of a showpiece franchise?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that answers your question to the extent that I wish I could answer it. Like we could have a 30-year guarantee or something like that.
No, for me, just having a 10-year guarantee is something to move forward. What I don't want to see is a couple years go by and there are changes, because I think the product that we have in Reading and the product that The Fighting Phils is developed. It's something that's valued by Major League Baseball, and they should value it because what keeps their engine going. They need us, and we need to continue to be the star. The other thing I liked about our discussion, Scott, was we talked about the other possible uses as that stadium is upgraded. And I shared with folks, and I think Donna's aware of this, I was in the marching band. I remember marching under the concourse, and that's all it was. It was basically the tunnel and a ball field where we had football games. And to see how it has just progressed over the years, and now we have an opportunity to take that a step further. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. As an example, we currently have one indoor batting tunnel. And we've used that indoor batting tunnel for everything from press conferences to cocktail parties for the CEO of Chrysler Corporation. And we've sort of repurposed every space we have here, even Lenny Moore tonight, where we put him as his green room. So there are some requirements in here, like, for instance, 2 indoor batting tunnels. So what I've been charging our architect people with is, okay, if I have to build 2 indoor batting tunnels, and we have 70 home games, I want to use those indoor batting tunnels for every day, 365 days a year. And so what we've sort of stumbled upon is if we put our pitching bullpens in the same physical space and encaps the entire thing, move the glass out basically all the way, we'll end up with the equivalent of 4 indoor batting tunnels with glass looking out at this beautiful ballpark. And we can reuse that space. We'll make everything modular. We'll be able to collapse the nets, and we'll be able to use that space for anything from, the Reading High School alumni induction ceremony of their Hall of Fame, or the Reading Education Foundation. We've recently hosted a lot of events like the Olivet Boys and Girls Club and John Paul II Center, and we've partnered with the DoubleTree and Craig Poole. He catered some of those events. So I think what we're trying to do here is take these spaces that would otherwise just be a clubhouse, just be a dining area for the team, just be a batting tunnel, and force our architects friends to create those spaces to be multidimensionally used. So whenever there's not an RFLs game, those spaces can be used, including the clubhouses, which some of you may have been in an event in our clubhouse already. We'll be able to do that even better now because we're designing it for that. We're designing it for multiple uses. So I think that's the part of it that we talked about yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other part, and I know this will be the details to come in, obviously this is government grant money, so that there's a lot of different requirements that need to be followed and that the city owns a stadium. But I think those are the devil in the details that will be addressed through the administration as this project progresses.
And it would look like the most recent RACP project, which I believe was 2011, and I think it was Cindy DeGroot on the city side that worked with Chris Haber in our office. And so we've been through the RACP process before. It would mirror that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christine?
Yeah, hi, Scott. Thanks so much for having or opening up the opportunity for most of us to come in and have some conversations with you. I most admire your strategy in trying to leverage a partnership like the county, the city, and yourselves, and present that to the Commonwealth to say, this is how important this is, and we're willing to do this together. There were a lot of discussions, just as Marcia said, a lot of questions that were answered. I really appreciate that Donna touched on the potential of a stadium district. I see so much potential for that in furthering economic development. Scott, when we met, you really kind of gave me a stat sheet that said, hey, here's kind of what economic development looks like. And it's not just about people coming into the stadium, paying for tickets and popcorn, getting in the car and leaving. Can you speak just a little bit more to us about how you believe that, keeping the stadium and making this investment will further the economic impact for the city in itself?
Sure, thank you. So a lot of stadiums have been built in my 30 years in this industry. We're a unique situation here in Reading, where we have a stadium that was built in 1950 as a public works project, one of the final public works projects, and we've continued to renovate it. So our community hasn't been sort of through the ringer, so to speak, of building a new stadium and really analyzing the economic development fully. So the model that I used on our economic impact sheet was really, quite frankly, copied from other cities that have had to build $60-70 million minor league ballparks. But what it really looks at is, our full-time employees and our payroll. We have 515 part-time employees, and what their payroll is, our admissions tax, our business privilege tax, our sales tax, our payroll tax, and in our most recent year where we didn't have a pandemic, 2019, we spent in the area of about 2.25 million on local goods and services, on top of what we spent on our salaries and everything like that. So the way that they calculate the economic impact is like a 4-time rollover of those dollars. And if we look at our franchise, it looks like $20 to $24 million annually using this economic multiplying factor that other communities have used to build the ballpark or to justify building a $60 million ballpark. So that's the sheet that I believe the scene that you're referencing. When I met with each of you, I tried to express to you that those are all numbers on a piece of paper. I mean, I can show you what we spend on goods and services and what we spend on our salary, and what our true economic impact is really honestly open for discussion. That's a tough thing to calculate. But generally speaking, a AA franchise of our size is regarded as turning over economic impact of $20 to $24 million a year. And as I mentioned to a couple of you, there are 43 municipalities, counties, states, or not 43 states, but 43 stadiums that don't have affiliated baseball this year that had it in 2019. They were contracted. And I would imagine most of those are struggling to get back that $20 to $24 million economic impact, whatever they have to do to try to sort of poach a team, quite frankly. I met with Crystal Seitz today from the Visitors Bureau, and we had that conversation. We were like, imagine if we were contracted. Imagine if we were contracted and we were sitting here right now with, a college wood bat team or something like that. We'd be probably having a much more difficult meeting right now about investing city and county and state money to try to hope to get a team back. And so thankfully we're not in that position. But I would just, as we consider investing these dollars, I thought it was a healthy thing, at least for me, to look at it from that perspective and how desperately we would be trying to woo a major league affiliate. As it is now, we're trying to improve the stadium to retain it.
Right.
That answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It touches on, I think some of it will be engaging in furthering the community development pieces that you've talked about, and that you do very well with the philanthropy. I think that's a foundation to the economic development. And I wonder too, just, being a fiduciary steward, right, in our roles as city council, if we're looking at another 10-year, in 10 years, when this comes up again, what are some tactics that you may be considering really for, like a development strategy? So if 10 years down the line we get here, it's time to consider this, major leagues approaching us. What are some thoughts on how we could really be putting some money aside continually to be making improvements and have those resources or a fund to make improvements as they come along?
I think that's a great question. This has some of that built in. So for instance, the city lease agreement, the city's responsible for the lights meeting the current requirements. We haven't had to do it in a few years. I think it would be around $70,000, $80,000 to relamp the stadium based on trend of what it had been the last time. This project includes all LED lights for the stadium, which would theoretically take away that relamping element and put us in a position to have proper lighting for, foreseeable future, well beyond 10. They say LED lights 25, 30 years. I mean, obviously they haven't existed for that long. So also, as it relates to the space, this structure that we would be building, it has a little bit of extra space here and there. It has some MEP storage areas. It has a little bit of extra space in and around the batting tunnels and the clubhouses, because the way they've done this, we've seen over the years is little incremental required increases. This is the biggest and heaviest one. It includes things like a female locker room, which we didn't have before, and a health and nutrition element, which we never had before. Some of it though is just making the weight room bigger and making the batting tunnel double instead of a single. So I think that, and we can get into the weeds on this as this project develops further, and we can kind of actually look at like the drawings, and when we go through the approval process for the permitting and everything like that, we'll see all that. But it has some growth in it, we've seen. It has some extra space in it, not so much to be biggish, honestly, but enough that we're not right at the number. So for instance, if the weight room has to be 750 square feet, it might be 900 square feet, as an example. So we did try, from an economy of scale standpoint, we did try to build enough of that in there. That we should be able to move a wall here and there, or already be at the number as the next thing rolls out, the next requirements roll out in, say, 9-10 years.
Great. Okay, this is my last question. What's Plan B? It sounds like all the ducks are in order, but what happens if for some reason we don't get that RACP funding? What's Plan B? Have you thought about that, and how we would make up the remainder if we all were to stay committed?
Great question. I'm very hopeful that if we can get 333 locally, that we can lean into the state, and Senator Judy Schwank has been on this from day one, and Mark Rozzi, and Manny Guzman, and so all of that. So I don't want to overplay the Plan A card, but right now I'm playing the Plan A card really hard. Because as I told you guys when we met, Erie got a nice number for their situation. So I'm hopeful that we could get to the 7 million. But to answer your question, if the state was not to give us 7 million, I guess we would see how close they came. And we would ask ourselves, is this something we could value engineer? But that would put us, Lucine, to your last question, that would probably put us back closer to just barely enough. And I don't know that that's a position that all of us really would want to be in, but we could go that route. We could value engineer it back closer to exactly what we would need and not look a little bit more forward ahead. Or the other thing would be to have that conversation with both the county and the city and ourselves and ask, can we make up that difference? But I think right now, it's a great question. And one we've obviously thought about. But I think right now, if we can show the state a 3-3-3 model, as far as I know, while every other baseball team in the state of Pennsylvania, if there's 5, are going to have the same problem, I don't think anyone is this far along. I don't think anyone has this level of conversation with their city government or their county. I know they don't have the developed drawings and pricing that we have. And we're really hopeful that that puts us in a position at the state to do well. But if we don't, then we'll revisit this. But our partnership with the county, which they haven't been involved in this previously, certainly helps that conversation. And maybe the state could do RACP over 2 years instead of 1 year, and we're certainly open to any and all. So Lucine, that's the question. Like when we had the All-Star game here, we had the cocktail party on the field and everyone said, what are you going to do if it rains? And I said, if it doesn't rain, it's going to be awesome.
Right.
And it was awesome. And if it were to rain, it wouldn't have been awesome.
Right.
So I hate to answer it that way, but I feel like if we can show this united front at home, and you guys have all been so supportive, and the county has been supportive. I just had a 9:30 Zoom call with them today. I believe that they're looking at taking action next week on Thursday. I think it puts us in a really strong position with the state. And I also feel like our partnerships with you and with the county, we would just revisit it for Plan B.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for your efforts and your genuine answers.
Thank you.
All right, additional comments or questions?
Can you hear me? It's
Go ahead,
Johanny.
Johanny?
Thank you for yesterday, by the way. So as I'm listening to you, well, first of all, I think it's important for I guess the public, whoever's watching, to know that the city owns the stadium, right? So it's one of our valuable assets. So I just wanted to put that out there because oftentimes, you know, our community may not understand the connection, right, between the stadium and what the ask is. Also, as you described what's going to be built, I'm curious, as you mentioned that there will be a female locker, are those lockers that are going to be built for the teams, are they going to be unisex?
So that's a great question, Johanny. So I guess we've never had a female locker room before. And as I may or may not have mentioned when you and I talked, but I've mentioned to some of you, there is a female coach in the Boston Red Sox organization this year. There have been 3 female trainers that have actually come here already this season. And they've been, they've been using the regular locker room. I mean, they're female trainers, so they're used to being in the locker room. But to have a female locker room would allow them, Johanny, when it comes to be time to like take a shower, they could go to the female locker room. But the locker room itself is separate enough from shower facilities. I'm sure the team, they would still have team activities that would have the female coach or female trainer involved, but at least they have a place that they can go to. And currently, we don't. And that's nothing that anybody would have thought of, quite frankly, 10 years ago, honestly. It's a great thing. I mean, I think it's a great thing that we have female umpires and female coaches, but we don't have the facility for that.
No, and I get that, and I'm in favor. I guess I'm thinking more progressively, right? Because we're talking about future requirements. But what if we have female teams, right? Will the new construction accommodate female teams?
Yes, it would. I mean, if we had, like, you mean like a girls softball game, or you mean like half a team's girls and the other half's boys? I'm not sure.
I mean, so the franchise for minor league baseball, I don't know what the future holds for women having a minor league team, whether it's softball, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question.
Thinking, right,
it's a future question. Yeah, I might be able to answer it this way, Johnny. This might help. So there would be one locker room that would be for the R-Phils. The other locker room that we'd be building would be for the visiting team. But if the visiting team wasn't here, even if the R-Phils locker room still had like all the R-Phils stuff in it when they're on the road, anybody could use the visiting locker room. We'd also have the existing visiting locker room that we'd be able to use for, say, for instance, say Reading High Baseball was going to play here against another team, or Albright College was going to play here against another college. We would actually have 2 really nice new locker rooms and one that we currently have. And the reason for that would be to allow the use of 2 locker rooms, even without touching the R-Phils one where their stuff's still in, if that answers your question. So that'll allow us a lot more flexibility, including the example you brought up where if we had 2 female teams or something like that, we'd be able to accommodate that. We would. Currently, we can't.
Right, right. And then also, as we're thinking into the future and with this new construction project, and maybe this question isn't for you, Scott, it's more maybe for the city and city administration, will we be revisiting our lease agreement?
Well, I believe we do that, Johanny, every few years. Scott, I don't know when the current agreement runs out.
I'd have to look at that, Jeff. It's honestly, it's pushed out pretty far. Linda might know better than I, but I could look it up. But it's pushed out. It's honestly out pretty far. But we certainly can have that conversation. I'm sure Craig would be happy to have that conversation if you felt the need to.
And I mention it because you brought up a point about the city's responsible for lights, but with these new upgrades, you'll have LED lights. So I just wonder if it changes then the dynamics of the lease and our agreement and things of the sort. That's all.
Yeah, it saves us a few dollars over time. So part of the 3 million, if you net out, 300,000 over 10 years or whatever, it's really 2.7 million. Are there any other additional questions? I have some comments, but I want to make sure everyone has had a chance to speak. All right, so the city contribution into a city property of $3 million to leverage another 12 is a great opportunity, not only for the city, but for the Reading Phillies. I had a chance to get on the phone with the governor's office and the mayor, and the point that we emphasize that the Reading Phillies are not an experiment. They're a highly successful, nationally recognized club, and the investment to them isn't a speculation. It is just solidifying what we already know works. Waivers were allowed to be deferred for a number of years, and it's no longer eligible, and it's time to invest. And I was one of those people when I sat down with Scott, said, yeah, we should be, this is a face of the city. When people travel here from around the region or states nearby and across the country. And as many young players come through and some become successful and very successful on both sides of the field, it's important that this stadium is always looked upon as, immaculate and something that's well invested in, because it is a face of the city, and it's important that we continue to take care of it. So, there certainly is a plan B, C, and D if we need to get there. I think the state will, take our support for this project very seriously. I think they understand that this is not an experiment as well. I know there's lots of people, trying to gather some of those funds, but this is money we know that's already going to give us a rate of return way beyond what we're investing. And Craig Stein, the owner, is putting money into. It's not like he's relying solely on public funding. And again, this is a city property, obviously under the full use of the Reading Phillies, who do a great job of extending their resources and using that as a hub to help the entire community. I think these enhancements will give Scott and the team additional tools to do that. It's a no-brainer. I've heard the stadium district. I've asked Scott to push those ideas forward in the coming years, and let's make it happen. We've had too many good names. I know they gave a lot of money to Erie, but I don't know who played in Erie. I'm sure there's been some great players, but
A great question.
Mike Schmidt and Ryan Howard and Ryan Sandberg and Larry Boa and Greg was. I mean, it's pretty hard, at least from the Phillies organization, not only professional baseball, to top those names. Jimmy Rollins.
Pat Burrell.
Yeah, Pat Burrell. Yeah. So, Maria, you have a comment?
Yes.
I just want to wrap this up real quickly.
Yes,
Go ahead, Maria.
real quick. Scott, thank you so much yesterday for all the information you have provided, very valuable information. I just want to mention that for, the revenue that the city received from the stadium regarding the admission fee tax has been pretty consistent for the last couple of years, between $95,000 and $85,000. As Johanny had mentioned, since the stadium belongs to the city is on the stadium. Probably, I would like to see maybe down the road if there is any way that the city can maybe receive a little more of revenue just for the, financial, just for the city by itself.
And that's something, down the road that needs to be discussed if we can. That's fine. It is an expense, probably a net expense for the city, but for the region, that's why the county's contribution is important here. This is a huge investment. And it may not be a net expense, Scott. I'm sorry, with all the economic development and all the revenue, it's hard to measure the impact. But I think we've all been on the bypass where we've had to wait because the cars are trying to get into the Reading Phillies Stadium. So we're going to put a resolution on the table between now and next Monday night. If anybody has any additional questions, please reach out to Scott or Linda, depending on what questions you have. Let's get them answered. And hopefully we'll get this moved forward for you guys next Monday evening.
Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the partnership with the city and each of you. Thank you.
Yeah, tell Lenny Moore we said hello, please.
I'll tell Lenny you said hi. I'll go out and see him right now. He's going to throw out a first pitch and make a few comments in a few minutes.
Good.
All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, council, we are going to continue on here. Charter amendment requiring council to employ its own solicitor. I think I saw a few emails. Linda, did you want to just talk about the final tally on just getting a solicitor to come in and help us talk about this process? You're on mute, Linda.
There was majority support for Mike Gumbar.
All right, so let's invite Mike to next week's meeting if possible.
Okay.
And we'll use that as an exploratory discussion, see if there's questions we want him to ask. I would challenge everyone to get their questions lined up. These lawyers aren't cheap. So let's try to be prepared. Any other thoughts on that, guys? And again, I'm trying to get this propelled through, kind of completed through by the time we get to mid-budget season, so we have an idea in the budget what we need to do. All right.
Fred, did you want to talk at all about our conversation with Anna about the county's approach, using the county's approach to this?
What, I'm sorry, I don't remember anything to do with the county.
Well, Anna, well, a few weeks ago, we discussed hourly rate versus some type of contractual rate. And Anna told us that the county
Right.
has some solicitors that they agree to pay them $40,000 a year to do X number of things, regardless of the number of hours they need to put in. With
Okay,
the
yeah.
understanding that some years they'll be working a lot and other years not so much.
Right, yeah, they do have a lot of attorneys that I don't know if you would call that being on retainer. I do know one attorney that did a lot of work for them that was basically treated like, yeah, a assistant solicitor, even though she had a her own practice and was a partner in a law firm. And in fact, I think your selection for acting was worked with her, so he would probably be a better resource than myself to ask. So I would suggest that be one of the first questions for Attorney Gumbar, is to ask him about that, the way that the county arranges for that. But because I don't know the details, I will talk to Anna tomorrow, see if she knows more. But I know she did some work for the county, but that was on a pro bono basis. So I don't know that she knows the intricacies of their arrangements with their outside attorneys.
Okay, so we'll pick that up. Go ahead, Linda, as part of next
And
week.
I can tell you too, that Bethlehem operates that same way. They budget $25,000 a year in salary for their solicitor, and then they pay his health insurance as well.
All right, so let's finalize the what before we figure out the how, but it's good to know that. I appreciate it. All right, guys, if there's nothing else on that, we'll schedule for Mike to come in next week. Again, we're going to ask everyone to have their questions ready. I had sent Mike 2 or 3 out a couple of weeks ago. I just encourage everyone to do the same. We're going to move on to the public art ordinance. Who is here to speak to that ordinance this evening? Linda?
Donna, did you want to introduce it?
Sure, and I think by now everyone knows the background of this, and Linda, Jahani, and I have been working on this. This came about when we were approached by Reading Pride regarding the establishment of rainbow crosswalks near Center Park, the park itself, at Center and Douglas and Center and Oley. The conversation and the subject matter just extended with the amount of people that were involved in these conversations to include more in the way of public art, from murals to banners that might be hanging from utility poles to other kind of artwork that might be on streets and sidewalks, and a process by which that kind of artwork proposals could be submitted, and then a review committee would look at it. It is not a question of looking at censoring anything or interfering with originality or creativity, but just to set some sort of standards. And also, there's a maintenance contingent that's important with this. I mean, we saw as an example what happened with the railroad mural in the 300 block of Penn Street about, say, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when graffiti was applied to it. And they had to go back to the artist and get it redone because the appropriate anti-graffiti kind of surface application wasn't done. So what we'd be looking at would be a process, just like sort of the monument process goes through, and a commitment if groups want to do something that, number one, it adheres to all the regulations. For instance, Center Avenue, as everyone knows, it's a state highway. That takes to another level the rainbow crosswalk, should they have been done. So you're dealing with different entities within the city. There are a lot of state roads in the city. If people are looking at crosswalks, it doesn't mean it can't be done, but it means it has to be considered. We have examples of public art that have been done in the past, from go to lights on Penn Street, which would be awfully nice to see those returned if we could ever figure out a way to do that in a different manner than what they were there. We had the drama, the comedy and mask lights that were on 6th Street near the Performing Arts Center down towards Santander Arena. We had the piano keyboard that was on North 6th Street in front of Performing Arts Center. We have out at Albright the paw prints for the Albright Lion. So we have examples, as well as the many, many murals that were done during several which were done at the Reading 250th celebration, Berks County 250th celebration. And certainly this is important as we look at entering major activity for the Reading 275th that will be coming up very, very quickly, starting next year, but certainly throughout the full year of 2023, which is the 275th. So we want to make it open, we want to make it inclusive, and we want to make it a process. So so the city can be enlivened by this, that we can show we're a hub of arts and culture, and that we can have everybody make the kind of statement we'd all like to see through art that's been made through the millenniums, and millennials as well. So I'm hoping this ordinance has answered people's questions. Again, a lot of work that was done on it. Linda particularly looked at Clearwater and many other cities to see their thoughts. And there are things like the rainbow crosswalks that exist in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and other cities. So that has happened in other areas. But there's lots of causes, lots of celebrations, and lots of art that's out there that we can see realized on our city streets, our sidewalks, and on the sides of our many buildings.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions, but before we go to Lucine, real quickly, I thought we had, Linda, an existing art ordinance. No?
No,
None at all.
We
Okay,
used to have a fine arts board that was part of the redevelopment authority.
that's right. Okay. All right, Lucine, and then we'll open it up to everyone else.
Thanks. Donna, I really appreciated the time that you took to meet with the Youth Commission last month as we did a walking tour or a walking art tour because there's a virtual art tour that everybody can access. And, ask the Youth Commission to think a little bit on this piece of legislation that has been proposed. And some things that came from that, creative insight would be one, the Public Art Review Committee consists of entirely an internal team for the city. Has there been consideration of having some of the public also involved? For example, perhaps somebody from the Berks Arts Council, maybe, local artists themselves, art teachers, members at large from the community, so that maybe it might be a slightly more equitable or an open perspective and consideration of the public art that might be being considered. That is a question that had been proposed to me. I wanted to share that as we look at this legislation. Donna, has that existed in the past, or is that open for consideration as we look at this formation of a public art review committee?
The Fine Arts Board, I think there were appointments were made to that, as we did with the boards, authorities, and commissions. That was established. It had slightly a different take on it, because that was established with developers and rehabbers of major buildings. Were asked to put 1% aside for public art for those projects. And the Fine Arts Commission dealt with those, like the Bertoia pieces, Shogun out at Fifth End, Greenwich, the gate thing down at 600 block 10th Street. All those that go back to the 90s and prior were part and parcel of that percentage from a developer that was to be set aside. Of course, the Fine Arts Commission went away. I believe it was during the McMahon administration. It went away, and now we've sort of been without any sort of guidelines or project, in place of that. And to your answer, I believe the Fine Arts Commission was composed of people well beyond City Hall's hallways. So there's no reason that this can't be expanded and amended. It's like with any piece of legislation. Now's the time to look at that. I think it's important we keep people within the hall involved in it for process purposes, but certainly getting outside points of reference are with the kind of folks we have here so important to the arts. I think that would be fine, and I would hope we can amend it to include that.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to see it opened and passed in front of, various art representatives who might be interested in entities and organizations. I think there's a place for that as a review committee. But as you said too, I think, we need to make sure that this is a vehicle that, helps our community. Just like you've said, let's paint a crosswalk. Well, who are the people? What are the steps? What is the process?
And who will maintain it? Yeah.
Exactly. I see this committee as that outreach to the community to figure that out, because it's one thing to enhance or beautify an existing crosswalk. It's another to want to put an artistic crosswalk in where there doesn't exist. One doesn't exist, right? So we have to be clear about what that is, and help the community decipher on that. I'd also want to see some safeguards put in. I know of other cities who may have allowed, maybe during the pandemic or in the past year or two more recent, some street art, which we're talking a lot about street art, but then, overnight paved over it and it never came back, right? So when we talk about not only the sustainability and maintenance of any piece of art that we put up, whether it's a mural or anything, not only for the upkeep or the vandalism that could happen, but also, as a city making a pledge to say, we acknowledge this as a piece of art, and we'll respect it there. So if it passes through the committee. So I think, those two pieces for me would be really important in considering this placemaking, because I see that there are many community members very eager and wanting to be involved as we move forward to help beautify our city and really foster community development in a way that we may have overlooked.
Exactly. And I think Linda puts up a note here in our chat that the reason other municipalities don't include our reps on their review boards because those reps could be project applicants. Well, in this case, they would then need to recuse themselves if they were to have their organization, bring forward just as any of us would. So there's no conflict of interest. I would leave that to Fred and legal, but I would assume that would be requisite as it would for any of us.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, I would certainly, first of all, I am glad we're moving this direction, but there is a lot more in detail that needs to be looked at. I read the ordinance. I think it's well intended. The point that Lucine brought was very much on target. You need to have individuals who have experience in promoting artwork to be on the decision-making body, because there are issues about public art that many times, and I think our history with our past murals, our initial murals, are a good example of that. If you don't understand mural technology and how that's sustainable, and I've been involved in actually helping to paint many mural projects and became aware of what was the best methodology to use. Okay, the parachute cloth is really what sustains. Okay, but if you, and a good example, and it's a horrific example, and it was done, I don't know how it was done, but at 5th and Penn, that mural that was painted on wood on the Santander Bank building was warped from the minute it was posted. Okay, so who was the one who was behind that? I don't know, but that just shows you how
that would have been fine arts, because that was during the fine arts days.
But you see what I mean is that it's so easy to be able to invest in a lot of beautiful artwork. And if you don't have the methodology down and that technical piece, which none of the people in City Hall should be expected to have that area of expertise. It has to have someone that is familiar with whatever type of artwork was done, whether it's painting crosswalks, whether it's mounting things on the sides of buildings. And I know being involved in the art or mural project at 6th and Franklin through the organization I work with, the Planning Commission made us go to very specific detail as far as the sustainability of that. And I think you can tell that one was posted there about 20 years ago. It's still fully vibrant with the colors when it was originally posted because it was done correctly. I then look at our Dove in City Park, which is in the shambles, and that wasn't sustainable. So one of the things I would suggest with this ordinance is that we do an assessment of our current art projects that are throughout the city, ones that maybe were funded through the Fine Arts Board, and be able to say which of those are still in good enough condition that they need to be retained and then probably updated. And I'm thinking particularly about the one on Penn Street, the 600 block, which has gotten graffitied a number of times. And then which ones, because of the condition they're in, may need to be removed, but with another plan. So we start prioritizing where the artwork's going to occur, what type of artwork is good for what particular section of the community, certainly having our youth involved. If you've ever walked through the halls of Reading High, you know what it is as far as fine artwork and the talents of the students, okay, there that have produced a lot of that. So I think there's a lot of energy behind this, but I would support it if we amend the ordinance to include individuals from the community that represent arts organizations, whether it be Berks Arts, looking at the Reading Symphony, whoever might be the key partners from our community. Certainly we have Goggleworks, but we just need to be able to think about people that can help make the better judgments, because we're all not in that place that we can do that. And then be able to look at the breadth and also define what artwork is. Okay, I believe in Memorial Grove, in the city, some of those statues there are definitely artwork. The turtle that probably people don't pay attention to at Hill Road and Perkiomen Avenue, that's a piece of artwork that's been neglected. So let's, get a handle on what we have and then how we can build on that. So I will be in any way behind the scenes to be and help in any way, because art's always been my passion. So I hope to see this move forward.
I think as we consider an assessment, we also have to consider, if we go back to the fine arts and who the developers were, we may have to go back and ask those developers if they still
Right. exist.
And we know some of them are no longer with us. So they're going to be, I understand what you're saying with the assessments, the Ramon Lago, Dove, former Mayor McMahon was taking a lead in that, and somehow that petered out. We never had
Exactly.
a follow up on that. So what we want this to do going forward, and going back, we can try to remedy what occurred, but going forward, so that there's ownership and there's a line that we can go back to someone and say, okay, here's an issue with this, you need to correct it, just like was done with the mural in the 300 block of Penn Street, when the artists needed to come back and do that again, because it wasn't done, I don't believe, in the parachute way, like the one at Division and Buttonwood was done, and the Frank Gilliard one was done. All
Right.
those were done in that way, so that's why they've held up time. But certainly we want to preclude what happened in the 300 block of Penn Street from happening again. So all this is certainly amendable, and I have no issue with putting folks from the arts community. How big do we want this to be? In terms of the committee, if it's too big, it may not be workable. And we do need a strong city presence in it. Jeff, I think Johanny has her hand up too.
Go ahead, Johnny.
I'm interested to hear from the administration though, because I know Jamal wanted, Mr. Jamal Abdallah from Community Development wanted sometimes to kind of like look at the ordinance, and I wanted to know what his thoughts were and if he had any input regarding the matter.
Well,
I just want to also defend it. He had that information for 2 months, so I just want to defend point of reference that we shared it. We did not try to keep it from anyone.
well, again, because the administration is deeply involved in the implementation and involvement with the approval of this process, we want to make sure they're fully on board. Is Jamal on with us this evening?
No, he's not.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know what his comments were, his concerns, but does anybody have them handy by chance?
The two things he brought up were, A, the redevelopment authority is interested in recreating the Fine Arts Board, which really doesn't have anything to do with this particular public art ordinance. And the other thing was a Stantec's recommendations for some robust public art in the downtown, which also doesn't really apply.
Council
does
President,
it,
go ahead, Johnny, I'm sorry.
no, it's all good. I know on my conversations with some community members, there was conversation about, should the city have its own arts commission to oversee everything? Now, I don't know what the details of an arts commission are. I don't know why the fine arts was dissolved or what worked, what didn't work, but maybe an opportunity to just explore that without pausing on this ordinance, because I think the ordinance allows us a beginning, right? To let everyone know that, yeah, we are open for art. We appreciate and embrace art, and we want to encourage folks to beautify our walls and our streets and so on. So I feel like this ordinance just makes it available, accessible. And I think that we're always changing and amending and modifying accordingly, so.
Council President, this is
Comment? Go ahead.
right. Yeah, as a member of the group, a part of the work group, I just want to highlight pretty much what other members of the work group said. The reason this legislation is different from the Fine Arts Board, the Fine Arts Board kind of invested public money into the art, so they had some sense of control or input on how the project was completed and how it was maintained. This piece of legislation really addresses the artwork that's funded by private citizens, and it ensures that there's a maintenance plan attached to these projects, because as Marcia shared, what happens when these projects are put up? Who's going to maintain them? Because they can look pretty bad if they're not maintained properly. So this, I know a signature part of this legislation says, if you are going to put a project, even if you're using your own money on your own property, that there has to be some kind of maintenance plan for a reasonable amount of time, so the project looks good and it fits into the neighborhood. So that's what kind of makes it different from the Fine Arts Board, because we're not using public money. We're just setting a standard and there's some responsibility that so that's and like I said, we can build upon it, but I think that's what makes this piece of legislation a bit different, to say the least, from the Fine Arts Board. That's a whole nother function because of the involvement of public money with that board. Just a highlight I want to share with the group that we kind of touched on and off.
Jeff,
Yeah, go ahead, Aiden.
I just want to let council members know that I have a meeting scheduled with Jamal tomorrow, and I will bring this up with him. And I think it'd only be fair that he have the opportunity to also address council. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so as well. I know.
I just don't want anyone to think he wasn't included, because he certainly was from the get.
Yeah.
Understood. I
I
just like the opportunity for him to address council.
Yeah. Anyway, any additional comments? I have a couple thoughts. I see in here that the committee would, at their discretion, the Public Art Review Committee may request the approval or advice to propose art from the Planning Commission. I would ask that the Planning Commission approvals and the HARB approvals remain consistent.
Mhm.
There's a lot of hard work that goes into both of those bodies, and not that somebody would arbitrarily come in and do something against what they would, but I think we have to value all the work they do in and around art, just to appreciate their thoughts about, because they may have setback issues and things like that are very important from a planning standpoint that, the Public Review Committee may not, the Public Art Committee may not even be aware of. I just think it's an important element. I know it can be a delay, but it's an important piece.
And Jeff, another component is neighborhood involvement, that if there's anything significant, the neighborhood gets involved. There are meetings, so no one feels blindsided.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, you can involve everybody.
Right.
Everything is art, but that's a whole other discussion. I don't want to get beat up here on tonight's Zoom call, but yeah, I used to work with a lot of teachers, and I tell them everyone's a writer, whatever they want to write, it's perfect, beautiful. So
I can relate to that.
the same way about art. We can overthink it, but that's just my opinion. I don't want to get beat up by anybody. All right,
The
Marcia.
community outreach is part of the application process.
Thank you, Linda.
Marcia, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that we can learn from, I posted a couple things in the chat room as far as the projects that have occurred in Philadelphia. And I think it's important to separate the things that are funded by the city on city property. And I don't believe that's the intent of this ordinance. I think it's a broader scope. I also think that we can learn as this is established regarding the murals, which are probably the most powerful way of communicating artwork of what happens in Philadelphia. And you've all been down there. You've seen the power of their murals, and it's a very well organized activity. So we may want to look at our partners to be able to plan how those murals, and they're very much community owned and actually funded to help the community. So we may want to be looking at what role the city. So this opens all different kinds of opportunities. I just want to see as much community engagement as possible, because that's where the beauty comes. And
Well, I
that's
think
where
we've
the
seen that
longevity-
historically with the Frank Gilliard, with the
Right.
Buttonwood Street. I mean, really, there
Beautiful.
has been, we have been doing that for 20 odd years now.
Right.
We just have to go across the bridge to see our neighbors in West Reading, what the beautiful things they've done along Cherry Alley there in Cherry
Exactly.
Street. So I think, I think we have had community engagement, and it can only be increased. We haven't had the level of Philly, but we've certainly had it, and we can point to it and be proud of it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say it again. I think the best artwork we have in the city is some of the stuff that was built, 100, in some cases, 150
The
years
architecture.
ago.
The architecture, yeah, it is.
Polish it up, it's already here. And then the nature that kind of surrounds it all. So just keep that in mind. All right. If there's nothing else on this ordinance, we're going to continue to proceed. We'll ask Jamal to join us next week during the committee of the whole for any of his comments. And we'll get this thing going here as we need to. But I certainly would require planning commission and HARB approval. That's just,
Anything in historic district stuff really has to have that.
Exactly.
so it should be spelled out there.
Yeah.
All right. Administrative code amendments. Linda, did you want to walk us through this section?
Okay. What
Jeff,
Oh, go ahead, Strat.
Jeff,
Yeah. Go ahead, Strat. We can hear you. Strat? Can you?
I'm having a problem here, Jeff, with my phone. Now you can hear me. I'm having a big problem here tonight with my phone.
All right. Well, we can hear you. Did you have any comments?
I get you, then I lose you. I get you, then I lose.
All right. Did you have any comments regarding the art ordinance?
No,
All right, Strat. And if you want to talk to us about the administrative code changes, go ahead.
In
no,
working,
thank you.
working through the pandemic, we've realized the importance of expanding our ability to reach out to people through, telecommunications. And when I looked at the rules of procedure, I found that our ordinances don't define what a quorum is. So this will take care of that. The amendment will allow 4 members present for the conduct of business. And we're also writing a component in there that will allow telecommunication in the future for council members and staff.
Does phone echo count as 2 persons?
No.
Okay.
So how we have it written so far is council members can choose to participate remotely for committee of the whole meetings at any time. But for regular meetings, it's limited to 4 times a year unless one or the following reasons exist. If an illness or disability occurs, if the member has an ill child or a family member, if there's an emergency or inclement weather, family or business travel, or schedule conflicts.
Is that it?
Yep.
All right. Any thoughts on those recommended changes by council members? Marcia?
Yeah, just a question. When you talk about the number of meetings, would that be regular council meetings? Would that be committee of the whole and regular council meetings?
There's no limit on the committee of the whole meetings, and there's a limit of 4 for regular business meetings.
Gotcha. Okay, that helps. And I think that if I could ask respectfully for Mr. Marmaru to go on mute, because I think we can hear his television in the background. Thank you.
We've been through this before. His TV's not on, Marcia. Stop it, please. Are there additional questions?
Yes, Johanny here.
Go ahead, Johnny.
So, it's interesting, because I think that the pandemic has taught us how to conduct business in a different manner. So I'd be curious to know, or I don't know if we can kind of analyze like our workload, workflow, and productivity since we've been virtual. Are we getting more done? Are we getting less done? And the same, I would say, even for City Hall and like our employees. Like, how has the pandemic impacted our standards of operation? If we analyze data, are our employees more productive, less productive? Just like us on council. Are we getting more done? Are we getting less done? Like, I'd be curious and interested to learn if there's a way to analyze some of this data.
Well, that would be a per office thing. I can tell you for the council office, our productivity's probably expanded.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even myself as a council, I find that because we've been virtual, I feel like, given my life and what I do for a living, that I don't know, it's giving me more flexibility and more opportunities to be engaged and involved.
Anybody else have any feedback on that?
Yeah, Jeff, I have my hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Lucy.
Yeah, I think it's only expected that we should be looking at our administrative code. I want to thank Linda for taking the steps to do that. Most companies are reviewing their policy to say, okay, now what? I think with ours, it's slightly more complicated. And I think we need to remember that ultimately it's to the public in which we're responsible towards, and where the powers and for meetings, determining the amount of meetings, determining who shall excuse, individuals. I see that, the criteria has been listed. I think it's reasonable. Does that fall on the council president? Does that fall on the body? Does that fall on our constituents? I think we need to be pretty clear with that because it puts us in a little bit of a unique situation. I understand the need to continue to have meetings in person, but also the ability to remote in, but also to excuse yourself. I want to be cautious in that we're not creating an environment if you need time off or if you are unwell or if you are unfit, then you excuse yourself and remoting in is not a replacement of that time. So I want to move through this cautiously and be really thoughtful about this. But I think it is time to review this. And we've kind of been going through this and learning over this past year and a half.
All right, additional comments regarding that issue? All right, well, we'll put these amendments on the table and see where it goes. There's certainly a lot of convenience working remotely. We're able to multitask. I mean, some of that we could possibly do there, but I think when it comes to government, people want to see us face to face, obviously with our regular meetings, and there's probably some flexibility in the committee of the whole meetings. And I think the members at the time can decide how they want to operate. And as long as we can communicate to the general public and make ourselves accessible, I think that's a good thing. I do think we're smarter in person. I'm only kidding. I don't know if we're smarter in person or not, but You know, there's pros and cons, you know, to both of these. I know, I remember the meeting last year where we weren't in person, and I shouldn't even been on the call. I was sick, but it would have been much more healthier to be, and that was a regular business meeting, to be live and be able to communicate to each other a little more clearly. But that doesn't happen often, so we'll put those on the table, and just like any other working document, you know, we'll adjust it as we go. I think just like the private world is going to see, you know, some adaptations, and maybe eventually it'll all come back to normal, but probably not. There's going to be, you know, quite a ways to go. And, you know, we're still not through this whole pandemic. I think we have to remember that, even though we're certainly more comfortable, we're going to see where booster shots and things like that come into play, and what the fall and the winter bring. There's so many new variants coming along that, you know, these things can be scary. They can adjust to the vaccines. They can, you know, there's so much we don't know. So this is going to be play it by ear kind of thing. And I think as time goes by, we'll never be back to normal, at least in the near future, but we'll get as close to it as we can and allow people flexibility where we need to. So the body can decide that. Regarding enforcement, I just think, you know, there are things that are spelled out, I believe, in the charter. Really, those are the only things that are, I think if you miss 3 unexcused meetings or whatever, but that's, you know, unless somebody completely disappears, that's not something we're going to enforce. Lucien, go ahead.
Yeah, just a general question. Fred, have you had time to review this, and do you have any opinion, you know, kind of on what's been proposed, looking at it on a larger scope, you know, from the legal perspective as to how other municipalities are kind of navigating this?
I only saw the proposed borough, and I think there's 2 state level or, you know, municipal codes that are proposing changes similar to what Linda discussed, where and I know that they haven't made it through the General Assembly or to the governor's desk, but I do think that what Linda discussed is a good starting point. But it is something we'll have to take a deeper dive into, not just from a legal standpoint, but just a practical standpoint as well, to make sure that you know, problem is with a lot of things like this, a lot of times the things that become legal challenges are the things you don't envision right away until it is actually set into motion. You know, some things you just can't foresee, but I think from what's been proposed or what I'm hearing, it sounds to be like it's consistent with what's going on statewide.
Okay, any other comments on this specific issue? We'll put them on the agenda and give them a vote, I guess, in the next meeting. All right, if not, we're going to move on to
The second piece.
Oh, the second piece. Go ahead, Lynn.
The second piece is just expanding the public's ability to comment by continuing the written public comment. What we've seen over the last year and a half is really an increase in public comment through the written component. So I recommend not shutting that off.
Yeah, I mean, we'll play it by ear. I think you're right. We can allow that window to open. We see where it goes. There's a good thing about having people take the time to show up in person, but there's also the reality that some people can't. So let's entertain it and see where we vote on it, and go from there. Any other comments on that?
Johanny here, Jeff. I mean, I have to agree with Linda. I mean, even when, you know, ever since we've gone virtual, I've noticed the most community engagement, involvement, participation ever. I mean, we barely had people come into change. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't meet in person. I think we need to have a balance. But I found that more people tuned in to watching us virtual on Facebook than they would come into our actual chamber space. So I actually appreciated that aspect of how we've been, that there are more people that are tuning in and are being informed, educated, more aware, and more active and engaged. And you know, that's what it's about. We want community to partake in what we're doing.
All right, any additional comments, Lucy?
I'm in full support of allowing individuals to submit comment in writing prior to following the guidelines. My concern is also, how are we managing, or how do we anticipate to manage hybrid, options to the meetings? And, if we can remote in, can constituents also remote in, right? And make a comment. And in addition to that, I would like to see maybe something structuring or in writing that, if we continue to stream live on social media platforms like Facebook, like we have, which really gives people a tremendous opportunity to be engaged, that they recognize that it's in writing, that any comments that they're making there, or, those are not considered public comments, we are not able to respond. I'd like to put that in writing so people know, and it's not anticipated or questioned. Just as we're outlining here are appropriate ways in which we're expanding our public comment opportunities than the latter of here are areas, where we won't, because I think we're going to have to continue or strive towards continuing hybrid options. And it just makes it so complex.
Okay, any additional comments? Marcia?
Yeah, and I really believe that as offices and businesses across the country are regearing and looking at how to integrate hybrid, which I think in itself needs to be defined, what that actually means and what is taken to do hybrid, okay? What that means as far as who's present versus who's not, because there's a big difference between physical presence and not being there, obviously. We need to be able to give the community an opportunity to communicate. I really am glad you made the comment, Lucine, about Facebook Live, because people have to understand that as counselors, we're attending to the business at hand when we're at the meetings. And even though we might see people through Facebook Live, our primary responsibility is to be doing business for the city and not being monitoring Facebook. We might want to look at that afterwards, but it really is for us to be able to be doing the business at hand on the agenda. So I think we need to be able to establish some guidelines for ourselves and for the public, how we use these different platforms for communication and being able to look at how we structure public input. I would hope that when we go back to what will be a hybrid meeting next week, that we're clear on how that's going to be run and who the technical support's going to be, because that will be a challenge. Just like the first time we came on the Zoom platform was a challenge. It's going to be a challenge to run a hybrid meeting, and we just need to be prepared for that. And I would hope, Council President, you're working with the administration, Linda, just so everyone knows, what they need to do to get their ducks in order.
Yeah, actually, I don't think it's going to be as challenging as it was when we first started.
Okay.
Due to the connection that IT created. I tested that out for the audit committee meeting last week, where we had in-person in the third floor conference room, and we also had people connecting remotely. And virtually that system that they created worked flawlessly.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to turn my
remotely.
laptop on. Yeah, I thought I was going to turn my laptop on and I was going to have to do lots of adjustments. Didn't happen.
Good. So that the public understands, we need to meet in the third floor conference room because the council chambers doesn't have that capacity to do that type of meeting.
Yeah, and we just got the estimate to do that upgrade.
Right.
So that'll be coming before council very soon.
All right, any additional comments?
Yeah, so if we're gonna be meeting in the third floor conference, and I know everything is in work in progress, then how do we welcome constituents to speak?
It'll
at
be
our
the same
public
way.
meetings?
It'll be exactly the same way.
Oh, they would have to be remote. They cannot come in person.
Correct. The elected officials will be in person. So we can have up to 9 people total in the room. And then all other attendees will be remotely. And when there's a regular meeting like there is next Monday, people will have the ability to register via email, via phone. to connect with the Zoom meeting or to do written comment or phone.
All right, any additional comments?
One last comment, Jeff. And so what is our timeline then? Do we have one?
For the council
In terms of-
chambers,
Yes, yes.
the company believes they can have it in at some point in September.
Okay. Any additional questions? All right, let's move on then to the charter amendment. And there's actually three of them. Marcia, do you want to walk us through the first one?
Okay, so the first one listed, just for a reference, in the current charter, it requires the Director of Public Works to be a licensed engineer, and that was put in place when the charter was first adopted. But through various administrations and feedback along the way, including I had a conversation or communication with the managing director about this before putting it forward, that it has impacted the ability of the city to be able to hire a director of public works. Plus, at this point, it's no longer necessitated due to the fact that we contract out those services that are required of a licensed engineer, so it's not necessary. Now, I'm not obviously an expert in this area, but I've seen through the years I've been on council that it has been a challenge, and I want to be able to ask the managing director to weigh in on this. But I think it's important to give the public an opportunity to vote on this as a charter amendment. So it takes the action of city council to have it put on the ballot for the November election. And my understanding is we need to have that by the beginning of August to be able to get on November's ballot. So Managing Director Abe, would you like to have any comment?
Yeah, for starters, this originated in an email I believe that we saw last Monday, if I'm not mistaken. I don't recall any conversations in person, but I did see this in an email, and I thought that perhaps we could deliberate upon it a little bit further prior to making it public. But now that we are in the public domain, I think it's important for us to have these discussions internally and discuss this at length before we put any question to the public. I'm all in favor of having these robust, healthy discussions. And I think it's just too soon to really deliberate upon this publicly. So I just wanted to make that clear as well.
Okay. And it's my belief, and you are correct, I did not communicate with you verbally. It was through an email communication because I wanted to make sure that the administration was aware that this was being moved forward. And it isn't the first time it's been discussed, but Linda, can you just reference the timeline that we need to move on this as far as getting it on the November ballot?
Yes, what you previously said is correct. We would need to have this ordinance to the elections office by early August.
All right, so we'll certainly wait to get some feedback from the administration. And we look forward to that. And we'll move on to the next item here. Correction to remove recall provision. Linda, did you want to discuss that with us, please?
Well, the following three things are three known, in charter incorrect things that have existed since 1996. So I think it's time that we start moving forward to eliminate them. The recall was found to be unconstitutional. They tried it in Philadelphia during the Rizzo administration, and it got bounced. The next one with the appropriation revenue ordinance, that was found to be not unconstitutional, but I have the note below it. It's superseded by the third-class city code. And then the correction to remove charter section 1204 charter amendments, it says the citizens can move to amend the charter through the charter's initiative process. And that's incorrect too. They need to go through the Board of Elections. So Fred had some thoughts on that correction.
So those are cleanup items. Would they all have to be done through a separate referendum?
Yes.
So, my suggestion would be we pick one or two over the next several elections and get them done because it can be overwhelming. I don't know, or do them
Yeah.
all. Any thoughts on that? Council, any opposition to moving these forward at once or doing them kind of a trickling manner? Then let's just do them all at once. We haven't gotten any feedback. Let's see where we go.
Okay.
Just get them cleaned up. I mean, they're going to be viewed as cleanup ordinances anyway, so. Or referendum questions. So that to be done in referendum questions. I think the questions had to be stated, if possible, inclusive as an explanation as to why.
Right.
If you want to put drafts for those together, we can start talking about them. And then we'll wait for Abe and his feedback on the engineer requirement.
Okay.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the agenda. Are there any other items for public discussion this evening? I know it's hot outside and I'm not going swimming, but maybe somebody else is. Lucine, go ahead.
Sorry, technical difficulties. To the administration, because it is so hot right now, have you been able to do regular rounds and ensure that our splash pads and our splash parks are fully operational?
That's a great question, Lucine. And yes, we have started Wacky Water Wednesdays again. There's been some discussion about perhaps holding it more than once a week. And for anyone that's wondering about the pool, I think this would be a good time to remind folks that a very essential part was shipped today. We're hoping that we get it by Thursday or Friday, so then the contractor will be able to steer us as to whether or not they'll be able to complete the work, hopefully either by the end of July or August now, but I can't guarantee anything yet. And I'm really hoping that that part comes through. And as you know, COVID has impacted the supply chain very negatively, not just for the city of Reading, but nationwide as well. So we're hoping that part was shipped today, number one. Two, that we are going to receive it in a timely fashion, meaning the 8th or 9th. So hopefully I'll have more information.
All right, any other additional items before we adjourn this evening for public discussion? Critical items. Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to be able to thank the Reading Police Department and Fire Department for all the concerted activity that occurred during the 4th of July weekend regarding the fireworks and then also other issues. We received a report from Chief Colonel and I very much appreciated. I did make a statement publicly and I just felt it was fair for council members to know what that was. It's because of my concern of the barriers, the impediments of being able to have our state general assembly repeal the sale of fireworks in Pennsylvania. I just feel like as a municipality, we incur significant costs to be able to deal with what was faulty legislation by the fact that we need to deploy more fire, more police. And I feel like it's the responsibility of the Pennsylvania legislator to be able to, just as they do in other states of emergency, reimburse the city government for those costs. I know this is something that's probably very difficult to quantify, but I just wanted to put that out there, that those are my thoughts. I think that when you see the severity of the fireworks that are available, it does actually, for that particular time, put us in a state of crisis as far as not enabling our police department to do what they normally do because they're literally trying to control and prevent fires and destruction in the city. So I don't know if this will go anywhere, but I felt I needed to say it publicly, that I do feel like the state does owe municipalities some reimbursement for their costs.
Yeah, and Marcia and I had this discussion earlier. I The last thing I want from the state of Pennsylvania is $100,000 check every year. You know, the amount of damage that's being caused to seniors and children and pets is immeasurable. And I wouldn't want the state of Pennsylvania to think by giving us some check every year that they were solving the problem. They need to grow up and fix this law. There's no in between that makes any sense in my mind. I've reached out to some of the state legislators, haven't heard from them yet, but I'll keep reaching. And it's incumbent as well. I mean, on the citizens of this city to grow up, not all of them, but many of them. I mean, I'm seeing 25-year-olds and 30-year-olds lighting off rockets in the middle of neighborhoods. I mean, people need to grow up. At the end of the day, I mean, the outside world is going to view us on our behavior. And I was on Cotton Street the other day and I saw a guy riding a motorcycle, the loudest motorcycle I've ever heard. He had to be 50 years old. And if I could have jumped out in the middle of the street and waved him down, I would have asked him, what the hell's wrong with you? You know, you're going through the middle of a neighborhood full of children and seniors and pets. What value do you get by blasting your motorcycle up and down the street? And it's that kind of behavior that's got to change. I certainly blame the thrust of this on the state, but we own part of it too, and the community has to step up. I think we've seen a noticeable difference this year. So I agree with Marcia that we commend the police and the fire department for the effort and the administration for the communication on this. It certainly was a little better than last year. Now, everybody was constrained last year, but it wasn't much better. And it certainly is completely unacceptable.
It was 10 times worse in my neighborhood.
In your neighborhood,
Never
yes.
seen it.
So
Never seen it.
Objective, yeah. I mean, I noticed
Never seen it.
a slight improvement, at least leading up to it. 4th of July was a complete war zone. But the state has got to fix this law. And I've heard some of the comments from some of these state legislators it just amazes me that they're even working at that level, who even elected them. But we have to get our citizens to understand that this isn't a place where you can just light fireworks off all day and all night and not think you're impacting people. There's not a check that the state of Pennsylvania could give us every year that would even begin to compensate for the damage that we're doing to children and pets and seniors and to just the everyday person. You know, it just baffles me for $6 million a year, which in the state budget is nothing, which could be found easily elsewhere, that they would make a decision like this. I almost believe they do it purposely. I don't know any other rationale for it, but you know, I'm not here to be a divisive of state government, you know, one side or the other, but people have got to find middle ground and make better decisions. This is the worst decision the state has ever made in recent memory. So any other comments, Donna?
Johanny has her hand up, Jack.
Go ahead, Johanny.
Thank you, Donna. No, I just wanted to know if at what point will we be discussing the stadium in terms of the $3 million? Is that a capital improvement project? Where will those funds be coming from? I just want to make sure that we have a clear picture and understanding, because aren't we scheduled to vote on it next week?
Yeah, we are scheduled to vote on it next week. We could ask the administration, there's a flurry of possible funds we could use, whether it's fund balance or capital funding, and perhaps even some, you know, some of the recent funding that we've gotten. But $3 million is certainly something we can meet up to pretty easily. But we'll ask Abe and Jamar to give us a kind of a matrix of possible areas. But it's a good question. Any other comments?
Yes, Mr. President, if I may, just to cap off tonight's meeting, I just heard from our fine staff that all these splash pads are operable, and most importantly, that part came in today for the pool. So, exactly. So we're hoping that the contractor will have good news for us in terms of putting it together, and we'll have a timeline for you. But again, nothing is guaranteed, but that is a step in the right direction that the part made it here. Thank you.
Yes, Strat. Thank you, Abe. Strat, yes, did you have a question or a comment? Strat? All right, before I go.
Comment.
Yep. Strat, go ahead.
Again,
sir.
I have to apologize. My phone is, yes, I need to apologize.
Okay, Strat, no problem. We can hear you if you have any comments. Donna, you had a comment?
Yes, I don't want to, go ahead,
Never
Strat.
mind, I'll bring it up next week.
Your floor is yours, Strat, if you
Yep.
want to make a comment, sir. Go ahead, Donna. I don't know. I think he hung up.
He did.
One thing that I think we all forgot to mention last week, and I think it's certainly been on all our minds, is the situation down in Surfside, Florida.
Great.
I felt bad after the meeting that none of us had expressed our condolences collectively to the folks down there, it's just a horrible tragedy. My experience as an old news person is that everything is local, and I'm sure there's a local connection we don't know about, but even if there isn't, just the humanity of this whole situation has just been just appalling. And I think one thing that this brings to mind is we certainly have other circumstances here, and it's unlikely things like that would occur here because we don't have the elements, the natural elements of, soft earth and salt water and all that kind of thing, and a haphazard building that occurred so quickly down there for all those condos and all those high rises. But it does bring to mind the importance of inspections, of code enforcement, and especially in an area where we have aging buildings. So we have nothing on that level, thank goodness. And I'm sure that most of our buildings are in good shape, but I know from the few years I spent on the parking authority and the rebar down at the Fourth and Cherry garage and other things like that, that things can happen. There can be concerns. And for any of us who have ever worked in a larger building, a multi-story building, or it doesn't matter if we don't work there, just that they're within our city borders, that the importance of code enforcement, building inspection can't be underscored. And, I think collectively, we certainly all extend our thoughts and our condolences to the people and the folks in Surfside, Florida, and the first responders and the folks who have come from Mexico and Israel that have been helping those people. It's astonishing. And it's I guess in the face of a tragedy like that, it's so great to see international cooperation, and it's even better to see local, state, and federal cooperation that we're seeing on a level they're experiencing down here in Surfside. Gives some hope that we collectively can work together in the face of tragedy. So sorry to bring this down to a sad sort of ending for the meeting, but I think you're seeing the best of humankind there in the face of this tragedy down there. And as one city to another, our thoughts are with all of them.
All right. Are there any additional comments here before we go? I just want to make sure everyone has a chance. Go ahead, Marcia.
Okay, and I just wanted to be able to thank the city, Public Works, for the work that was done. First of all, I guess to backtrack, to be able to thank the fire department and the police department for rescuing that gentleman that was caught in the cistern, because it wouldn't be if the police department wasn't on top of that, that man might not have survived. So I think we're doing what we need to do, but then to be able to also alert the public that there's some major construction work going on to the railings. And I was up at the pagoda today and was watching how all the railings are being replaced. I would hope that the city could post on its website just to let the public know that there's a lot of work going on around the railing area. There will be road work. So that the public is aware when they go up there that there are some safety issues that need to be looked at. It's not going up to the pagoda and walking around as usual. And so I would hope that that would be, I do not believe it's the responsibility of the Pagoda Foundation to be speaking to it directly, since it involves city contracting and city services. So just, if that could be appearing in some way, be very much appreciated. I know personally, I ask people to not go into certain areas, and even though there's barriers up, people don't obey them. So I think it's better for the city that we, inform the public what's happening and what might be happening in the future. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other comments here this evening, We will simply adjourn. All right. Everyone have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Stay cool.
Night.
Good night.
Oh, wait a minute.
Wait, executive session.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's that?
Oh,
Why?
You want us to stay on?
Most of the people.
yes. Hey, just let me stop the recordings.
I'm not, I don't think I am. Oh.
We need
Should I
to get
start
people
texting
back.
people?